Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Columbia International Arbitration Association event, Breaking into International Arbitration. My name is Simon Bianchi. I'm one of the co-chair of the Columbia Arbitration Day, and I'll moderate today's debate together with my great colleague, Andrea Chong, who is Columbia International Arbitration's LL.M. president. We are very pleased to have three esteemed speakers with us today. First, Ank Santens, who is a partner at White & Case and heads the America Dispute Section. I think she served as counsel or arbitrator under more or less all rules and that you can think of, and we're very happy to have her with us today. We also have the pleasure to welcome Hugh Carlson, who is currently managing directors of Three Crowns, and in which capacity is responsible for the firm's global operation. And he has represented clients across a range of industries and once again under most major arbitral rules. And in addition to his private practice, Hugh also teaches international arbitration at Harvard Law School. And he's one of the co-founder and co-director of the International Arbitration Workshop there. And finally, last but not least, our very own Kabir Duggal, Senior International Arbitration Advisor at Arnold Porter, and as most of you probably know, also a professor at Columbia University. And I'm not going to list all the accolades he received over the last years, but there are a few, and we're very happy to have our three speakers with us and to have all of you with us today to discuss. And without further ado, I'm gonna leave the floor to Andrea to start with a few questions about how to best break into international arbitration in 2022.
Thank you for the introduction, Simon. So I guess today for the event, we've kind of structured it into three key things we want to talk about. First, how students can network with individuals. Second, how they can ace the interview process. And third, beyond the interview, more general questions that we've received from junior practitioners. So on to the first question of networking, and this is just to all three speakers. Do you have any general advice on how to approach someone? And what are the huge do's and don'ts that you'd say we should or should not do? Anyone want to jump in first? Kabir, I see you nodding, so maybe you can kick this off.
I was just nodding because I liked the question. I didn't intend to go first. This is a great event. I know this is a stressful time. You have two really fantastic people here. Hugh, I think, is somebody Columbia knows. Ank is probably Columbia's most famous alum in arbitration. So you're really in very good hands. Let me just kick it off by saying four things. We are still in a hybrid reality, and that doesn't show any signs of changing anytime soon. So be flexible. With that in mind, when you are emailing a person to meet them, try to do four things. Be considerate. You're asking somebody a favor. It can get really obnoxious when you get emails that sound more like orders. Just read your email, think about it. That's my first point. The second point I would make is be thoughtful. Read the person's profile. I have received emails where I know this is a generic body being sent to everybody. There's no correlation to anything about Kabir and what Kabir does. Right? So just be a little thoughtful, tailor it to a person you are reaching out. I mean, you want somebody to give you time. Maybe you take the time to show that you're interested in that. Point number 3, no typos. And more importantly, this is happening recurringly, no mistakes in names. People have called me Dear Miss Duggal, which I clearly don't see a problem in that, but you haven't even made the attempt. I've had totally different names put to me altogether. So you haven't even bothered to copy check. Just, you've just got copy pasted something. And the final point is find common points. That always makes things more interesting, right? If you're reaching out to Ank, for example, from Colombia, that's an awesome point. She's a JD LL.M. She's somebody who has succeeded in this field. That's an awesome connection point, right? Find commonalities, find areas that are interesting talking points, and use that as the basis to start the process. I'll stop here because I want to hear these awesome other two speakers, but just some points for us to get started.
This panel, I think I'm no longer muted. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this panel. As you heard, I am a Columbia graduate myself. I tried to find a job as an LLM and did not succeed at it, actually, originally. And then went back to the JD, but I did succeed during my JD and I didn't fully finish my JD. So I just want to say that for two reasons, I guess. I don't want it to be said in the world that I actually have the JD degree. I don't. But secondly, also to let you know, I've been there and I know this is a challenging task. Kudos to you for wanting to undertake it and to start by coming to panels like this. It didn't exist when I was in Colombia, and I think you'll learn a lot of valuable things that I certainly could have done with myself when I was applying. I echo a lot of what Kabir said. Actually, a lot of it resonated with me. I think when you're at an in-person event, so the networking is in person, try to say something interesting, but also not overly interesting or complicated. And I actually think a lot of our job is about judgment, and a lot of what I'll be saying today is about judgment. So you want to try to come up with a nice, unique little angle. On the other hand, you don't want to start bragging about yourself for 10 minutes. That's usually not a good approach. Don't oversell, don't undersell. Try to be confident about the qualities that you do have, but don't make it sound like you've basically run a case when most likely you haven't at your stage of a career. I don't appreciate that. I do like it when people, again, are genuine about where they are, enthusiastic about what they want to learn. Of course, we all, and we'll talk more about what we're looking, what qualities we're looking for, but it is a mix, of course, of smartness, team play, being able to communicate well with people, and being somebody that people like to be around. That's an important thing. On the other hand, this is a serious job. We're not here to have fun all the time. So again, to try to have that balance between these skills, I think is the most important thing in an in-person networking setting. In a cold email setting, it's basically what Kabir said. Try to find a point of connection. Try to show that you did your diligence. I actually get emails where the email is in one font and my name is just in a different font. That's an email that I'm basically going to set aside right away. If you can't be smart enough about getting one font in an email, it's not worth my time. It just isn't. Also, as Kabir said, we are busy people. I think we all want to do well by other people, but we also do have to get on with our day job. And so sometimes when I get emails, I will always respond, always, and I will always try to give the person an opportunity to communicate with someone. It may not be me straight away. I very often look at the profile that I receive and then will ask somebody else in my team to have a chat with this person. And then please just do that and do that enthusiastically. Sometimes I get a pushback. No, I really want to speak to you. that's not the right approach in this type of setting. And of course, then make the most of the opportunity of the person you are talking to. They are in my team, they're a team member, and I value their views tremendously. So those talks are important. And I think those were the main points that I wanted to make for this one.
Well, let me begin by saying how pleased I am to be here. It genuinely is an honor. Echoing the kudos of others to our attendees, it is going to be for many of you a unique time and perhaps at times a stressful time. There are a lot of LL.M.s that are expressing interest in the international arbitration market this year, and it's important, I think, to familiarize yourselves with what you can do to stand out and to be more competitive in that, and that's what we're hoping to achieve today. One of the perks of speaking third with so distinguished a trio, or at least a duo, is that I can just say that I agree with everything that's been said, and I can certainly say that here. I don't have very much at all to add to that, so permit me, if I may, to sort of make a few passing points, and then we can move on to the next good question. When it comes to the in-person environment, Ank said something very helpful, which is to keep it interesting. And I think that one way that you can do that is to make your own luck. You will perhaps have a sense of some of the participants that are going to be at a given conference based on the program, and there may be other information available as well. So to the extent that you can kind of read up about those with whom you would like to have a chance to talk with, you might open the conversation by making a comment about a point that they raised in a paper or in a recent panel, something like that that will allow you to have a natural in-way and allow you to demonstrate your interest in not only what they're doing, but offer something insightful to say. I think is a more memorable and helpful way to build a rapport with someone as opposed to just kind of striking up a conversation without that additional scaffolding, maybe talking about the weather, which is just not going to distinguish yourself more generally. And in a similar vein, appreciating that there aren't going to be as many conferences, at least at the current time, when it comes to emails, many of those in the arbitration community with whom you would like to be speaking are going to be, from time to time, not only speaking on panels, but there could be recordings of panels in which they presented, and sort of other occasions in which they've been available in interview and the like. And Kabir is sort of at the forefront of some of that, and so that could be a great way to see some of these individuals in action, expressing views on some points that you could use in sort of reaching out to them. And so that's another way of finding something interesting to say, right? It's a hook that you can use to latch onto as apart from kind of just introducing yourself more generally. The only point that I would make that I think is a little bit different, Ank mentioned that she's good about responding, and I believe it. I am not always good about responding. And so please don't hesitate where there's been radio silence to send a polite nudge. It's not going to be misinterpreted. Sometimes these emails will sort of for whatever reason, maybe they land late on a Friday or what have you, they won't be seen, and that shouldn't be interpreted by you as sort of an implicit rejection. To the contrary, don't hesitate to follow up a week or so later, say just in case, a friendly nudge, and that could be very well received.
Thank you. Yeah, I think those are all very basic and fundamental things that everyone should be taking note of. But I think, Hugh, you mentioned something about being interesting and kind of having that hook to have someone respond to you. So I was wondering if any of the panelists had something to share about one of, say, an interesting story of how someone reached out to you that was particularly persuasive and kind of got you thinking, yes, I would like to sit down and have a chat with this person. Maybe Kabir, you want to?
Sure. The next question will go in the other order, but let me start this off. It's easier to tell stories where people screwed up, and there are a lot more of those. But I think you've just gotten a preview. You're all smart people. Trust your instincts. I think what tends to happen is you get anxious and apprehensive, totally understandable, and then you do rush decisions and just take a pause. That's a big point for you all to consider. Things that have appealed to me is when people send a thoughtful email, just echoing something Hugh said. Good sense would say don't send emails on Mondays or Fridays. Just putting that out there for whatever it's worth. Those are generally bad days in the work week. Although COVID, what's a work week? We can put that as a meta question. But sometimes we have had people who have reached out with a writing idea, looking at what I have done. That catches my interest more readily, more apparently. Somebody has taken effort to do something, to outline something, to come out with something, value added. Those things catch attention more readily. Tone matters just generally in life. People who are more thoughtful, more erudite in anything that they're doing, that'll catch your attention more readily. But I think that's something I'd urge you to do. Think about how or where you can add value. So I stop here and pass it to the two other awesome panelists.
Okay, I was asking you if he wanted to go next, but I've been unmuted, so let me let me go. So two particular instances came to mind for me, but I'll go to the same point. So I have on my web CV a note that I represented Garry Kasparov in a number of matters. And I once got an email from a French applicant who was a very strong chess player himself, and who sent me a very enthusiastic email about that experience. And then he also had the more general qualities that I was looking for, and he actually ended up being an associate at Whiting Case. But that email where he basically said, it's the first time I ever see anybody does an arbitration in the chess world. If I could help even this year, if you're still working on these matters, I'd be so thrilled to be working on them with you. And I actually, we then hired him, and then I had to go to Norway. It's a long story, but for the World Chess, the presidential election of the World Chess Federation that summer before he started working, and I actually invited him to come with me, and we spent 2 weeks together in Tromsø on the Arctic Circle in Norway, even before he started his job. So that was a memorable story. One other more recent one that I thought was a good one is I had an applicant telling me about a very specific BD opportunity in the country that he's from. And that also caught my attention. I thought that was a very nice way to go about it.
That Ank's last point is a terrific one. I think that sometimes it doesn't need to be a personal connection to a business development opportunity. Those will be rare. But even if sort of in the pages of Global Arbitration Review or elsewhere, there are matters in which you may be especially well suited by dint of language, cultural affinity, interest, or otherwise, that can be something that you can either introduce in an initial email or in subsequent conversation. We've seen that deployed to impressive effect on our side, and I would echo Ank there. I think speaking personally, it's always nice when candidates, and it doesn't need to be in the initial email, but if there is a non-obvious linkage that can come up that introduces a more personal touch, and this is by no means at all a precondition to success in this, but if it's there, there's no reason to deny yourself it either. So for example, from time to time, I'll be interviewing someone and it'll become clear that they're from Southern California. And I tend to consider myself a reasonably rational person, although some of our folks here may disagree. And when there's that California connection, I immediately become kind of irrational. And I'm just like, oh, that's amazing. Where are you from? What kind of Mexican food do you like? So on. And so it derails the interview unhelpfully, but it does mean that there's some type of personal relationship. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. And so if there's a way to kind of seize upon that, it can be with interests, hobbies, and so on, then you I think will do yourself well by exploring it. But again, I think that can be secondary to some of the more important aspects of this, which we're going to talk about shortly.
thanks very much for these very useful tips and war stories. Maybe switching now a bit the focus to interviewing, from networking to interviewing, and starting with maybe the most obvious question, but the one everyone is asking him or herself. What are the qualities you look out for in an interviews, and maybe especially for LLM candidates, how can they distinguish themselves, or what are the specifics? And maybe starting in the reverse order. So maybe you can go first.
So lots of different answers here. I think that one way to distinguish yourself, or to think about this rather, is sort of avoiding the negatives while embracing the positives. And so one thing that Kabir has touched upon is avoiding typos. And so you're going to want to make sure at the outset that you've completely scrubbed your CV. You've had sort of friends and peers review it. It's one of the easiest ways, I think, to kind of stand out in a suboptimal light. There will be subtle differences in language that may not be immediately obvious to some candidates, and so it is useful to have others kind of take a close look at that. And so too with career resources and the like. When it comes to affirmative ways, positive ways to stand out, I think it's useful to have reflected closely on the parts of your CV, and this is directed a little bit more towards LLMs, but certainly not at the exclusion of JDs, towards parts of your CV that feature legal work in which you've done something, and to think in advance of the interview about how you can speak intelligently and in detail to that, because that's going to be one of the areas that the interviewer is likely to zero in on, and it can lead to a discussion in which they're not only asking for a summary of it, but they may start to assume almost a professorial or even adversarial role in this, where they're kind of asking you questions and forcing you to kind of support your position a little bit. You might be responding to a hypo, and it's only to kind of more fully test your analytical chops in this. And so you may want to think about, what are the types of questions in that vein that I would be likely to receive in relation to the legal work that I've provided. But at a minimum, just making sure, if it's been some time, that if those are bullets on your CV, that you're prepared to speak in a little bit more detail, having them in working memory as opposed to trying to recollect then and there. And that may strike some of you as just being kind of an obvious and unhelpful point, but I've had a number of interviews over the years, and perhaps others have as well, in which it does seem like they have to pause and kind of reconstruct what it is that they did here. It's been so long since they brushed up their CV, and they turn their mind back to that. And that's a missed opportunity. I think the interviewer is really going to want, above all, to understand what you'd be bringing to the table in terms of legal thinking, analytical thinking, and reasoning. And this will be, I think, a great way for them to do that. And so that'll be where you can shine.
So I'll focus more on what qualities one looks for when hiring someone for a career in international arbitration. And to me, it comes down to, one looks for the qualities that you need for this job. And first of all, this is a tough job. We face very difficult problems. We rarely get any easy assignments. Most of the things that we need to do are tough. They're complex problems. There's no easy answer. If there was one, the client probably wouldn't be looking for your advice. Very often there is no answer, really. I mean, you have to do the best you can. And various different laws may apply. These are just very complex legal problems. I was talking about it the other day. I don't want to expand too much, but my brother is a civil engineer, and they always say, oh, the smartest people have to be engineer. And I always go into debate with that, because certainly in the line of work that we do, I think the smartest people need to be lawyers, because we have a difficult analytical job. So the first thing that we look for is for really smart and analytical people. That's the first quality we're looking for. Secondly, we work hard. Our clients are demanding. We have to deliver very often on short notice. So I'm looking for somebody who's willing to work hard, who has energy and grit, who I think will be able to, work with me at 11 p.m., maybe 3 a.m., and keep up the spirit and keep up the good work. So that's another thing that I'm really looking for. Teamwork. All of our work is teamwork. So I'm looking for a team player, somebody who can work with other people and work together, and who believes that the sum of the parts is more than the parts. I very much believe in that, and I really look for people who do too. And lastly, I would say we spend a lot of time together, so I'm looking for somebody that I like and that I will want to work with together. And again, that's not about cracking jokes. That is about being supportive of one another, being on the same line, and just working well together. So these are the general qualities I would say that I look for in a candidate. And then just specifically to language, 2 points, one for LLMs and one for JDs. I think for LLMs, 2 points on language. First of all, of course, language ability can be very important. If you're a Spanish speaker, Spanish is hugely important to us. Russian, Arabic. There's a few other languages that are key. But then also to show and demonstrate your ability to read and write in English. It's extremely important. And especially, I would say, the writing. Not being a native English speaker myself, I've contended with this, and I can tell you, you can write like a native English speaker. And that's what we ultimately want and need. And so if you are a good English, if you write well in English, for instance, and you're confident about that, show why, show how you've come to be a good writer in English, volunteer to do a written test or a written something in English so that people can actually see for themselves that you are a good writer. Because with LLMs, that's often a point of doubt. And you want to convince that you can do the job. You can come in and do a memo, just like a JD. That's an important thing, I think. And then conversely, for the JDs, or not necessarily the JDs, but the Americans, show that you have an international interest. Why do you want to go into this job? Is there something in your background? And if there's not, why are you interested in this international field, and why do you think you would be good at it? That's it from my end for this.
I'm not going to add too much to what the prior two speakers have said, because I think I couldn't say it better. Ank, my dad's a civil engineer. My sister's an electronic engineer. We have these fights constantly. So that resonated with me. Let me just point out a few things for the interview. Congratulations. If you have made it to the interview stage, people have already looked at your resume. They've already done some amount of screaming. So take that moment to take a deep breath that you've already crossed one hurdle. The key point the two things that I'm looking, one of them is very similar. Both of them flow from what Ank said. I want to make sure the person isn't going to murder me in the night. That's point one that I'm looking at. I'm just kidding. That takes me to the second point. I'm trying to make sure the person we're going to have is somebody we can work with late in the night and we're enjoying the experience. This is hard work. This is going to involve late nights. And you want to be around people who recognize, we're in this together. We're going to do this together. So be interesting, be positive, keep the perspective point that we heard, don't go to either extreme. That's the other end of the spectrum, which isn't helpful. Find the moderate balance. Look at your resume, think about interesting points, and wherever you can highlight a business case, do that realistically. I'll stop here because I don't want to repeat what our prior two speakers said, but be interesting. You all have done awesome things. Give yourself some time to think about what makes Andrea unique, what makes Simon unique, right? What might those be? We can't tell you that. That's unique to you. You need to sit and think for a moment. Oh, this is something I can highlight. This is something I can realistically put forward. So give it some time just to reflect a little bit. I'll stop here.
Thanks very much for the detailed answer that we got. And now maybe turning to a bit of a more specific question for candidates with a greater interest in niche aspects of practice. For example, public international law. Should they communicate that interest in the interview? And if so, we have another question that is also quite specific, but for people envisaging clerkships or fellowships, how is that valued in international arbitration practice? And once again, how should they best communicate their intent to apply for a clerkship or fellowship? And maybe starting with Ank.
So on the niche aspects of the practice, I do think it's helpful to communicate that, because I think it's, first of all, you always need to be genuine. That's a very important tip. Be genuine. That's what people are looking for. And if you have a serious interest in a niche, you should communicate that, because that's what makes you genuine and probably interesting. On the other hand, niche practices are exactly that. And unless you're interviewing with somebody who does only the niche that you are looking for, you should also be very careful to communicate that this is a specific interest that you have, but that you are interested in the field broadly and enthusiastic about everything in the field. Because typically the niche practices, and I think public international law is a great example, there's very few law firms that do only public international law matters. There's a couple, but they're few and far between. And most firms that you will interview with have a broader international arbitration practice that will have a variety of matters. And we generally want our arbitration practitioners to be well-rounded in the field as a whole. It's already a niche field, right? In a way, you're already niching yourselves down from disputes more generally. So to within international arbitration niche it further down, I think you have to be careful. Now, if the niche is a niche where a lot of work is being done and it's a profitable line of business, then by all means you can play it up. But if it is a niche that's probably not the moneymaker for the firm, and probably not where you will be able to spend 100% of your time, you have to be realistic. And again, not say, and I'll also do the other work, but to also be enthusiastic about the other work and recognize that a lot of the skills that we have are transferable. And with a lot of the other work that you do, you will learn a ton of things that you will also then be able to apply if you practice in the niche practice. But that, I think, is what I would advise about that. I'll also, and maybe related to that, in the end, we all love the legal aspects of our work, but in the end, these cases are about bringing a monetary return for clients. So showing that you are interested in that aspect, that you are interested in damages, that you are interested in how a boiler works, if that is what you have to argue in a case, is very important too. On clerkships, I haven't had actually a lot of applicants who want to do a clerkship after we join us. The majority of applications that I get, people have done a clerkship before. I'm not sure. I think the reaction to that at our firm would depend a little bit on the individual interviewer. I personally about a clerkship would want to think about, okay, and when in the career would that be, and how would that affect the career path? Because I tend to, I came to White & Case and I worked hard for 8 years and I became a partner, and that was my trajectory. And so I tend to want, when our associates come in, to work with them and develop them year after year. So I personally would struggle a little bit with the interruption in the career and how are we going to work with that. So for me, indicate an interest in a clerkship it wouldn't be a plus for me. I would have to work around that with the applicant, how we would make that work. So, and I think I'd rather have them do it before, probably. And so maybe have a conversation about, we do like you a lot, let's keep in touch. And then speak when you come back. Again, the clerkships within the career, it's more difficult for me to get my head around. Kabir, or you?
I'm happy to pick up from there. Little to add on the niche point. I think Ank covered all the bases there. The only point I suppose that I would underscore is Ank's about not wanting to signal sort of a passionless willingness to do work that isn't within your niche. I think we sometimes see that, especially more with PIL than other spaces, where candidates will come in saying, here's what they're passionate about, and sort of with a shrug acknowledge that realistically they would have to take on other work. I think that the most competitive candidates will be authentic to themselves and sort of express an interest in certain aspects, and that can include public international law. It can include sector specific work and what have you, but they will also sort of be very forthcoming about their interest, or at least their enthusiasm about taking on other practices and learning and growing, and often that is attached to an acknowledgement that they're still sort of coming into the space, and that before long they may come to appreciate that their interests ultimately lie elsewhere, which I think has been true of many of us in the practice. We sort of start off in one place, and in our career and our interests take us in another. On the clerkship side, I think this varies not only from individual to individual, but from firm to firm. And it's just as a general observation, there are any number of successful practitioners in international arbitration that have come from federal clerkships in the United States. Gary Bourne, Donald Donovan, my own colleague Luke Sabota have all clerked, I think, for the Supreme Court, and certainly others as well. And so, it's not to suggest, especially to those JD listeners on the call, that it isn't an effective path forward in international arbitration. But I think you'll just want to be mindful about how you're going to frame that, if asked, how will lend value to your practice, that you're able to explain that. But it is something that I think, for those of you interested in it, you shouldn't shy away from exploring it, but you should just understand that in the arbitration space, there may be a little bit more interest in better understanding the rationale than in litigation or even in transactional practices in the United States, where there's going to be, I think, a clear pathway established over time for those. I think in terms of timing, to Ank's point, we tend to see colleagues who are doing the clerkship directly after law school. It's unusual in our experience to see them coming into practice, then pivoting to a clerkship, and then back into practice. But that definitely does happen as well.
I'll keep this brief because, again, I agree with pretty much everything the prior two speakers have said. Look at the firm. I get emails telling me, we love ICJ, want to do ICJ work. Awesome. We don't do ICJ work. What do you want me to do about that? There are 5 firms that actively do ICJ work, and even actively I'm using in quotes for the 5 firms. If your interest is international law, a more, I think, thoughtful way to do it is to couch it in firms that do ISDS work, that you do ISDS work, there's a public international law component. I find that interesting. Add value that way. So just look at the firm. For clerkship also, just echoing what Hugh said, look at the firm and see what the past practice has been. If you see people have done clerkships Often you can figure this out. Websites will tell you when the clerkship was done. I know our firm does that. If you see people doing it in the course of their career after they've started, that may be an option. That may be something you want to explore. If you don't see that happening, maybe this is not the right opportunity to be raising that. So this is again one of those things. Research your firm, invest the time, questions that are bothering you, questions that you have. Often you can get a good understanding. Look at the firm's websites. They are dynamite sources of information. It really bothers me when I get what I would consider to be really stupid questions, right? There's something you could have in 5 minutes spent some time on the website and come to the answer. So really urge you, spend time, research the people in a non-creepy way, know what the firm does, and go prepared. I'll stop here.
Thank you, all three of you, for these tips. I think it was very helpful to know that one of the key skills that candidates should have is also just doing your background research before you reach out to someone. And with that, we want to go on to our next question, which is, what are some other ways that candidates can prepare for the interview? Do you have any practical tips? And in particular, how can candidates prepare for the more technical questions that they might receive in an interview? For example, talking about an international arbitration case that they found interesting, or answering a question on substantive law. Perhaps Hugh, you want to go first on this one.
Sure. So I've already touched a little bit on my views when it comes to reviewing your previous legal work and having a handle on that, and perhaps even kind of thought a little bit about the types of follow-up questions that you may receive in response to a summary. So I won't so much revisit that. I'll be interested to hear what Ank and Kabir have to say. But on the preparation more generally, I think one area that candidates sometimes underappreciate the value of is when they're given the opportunity to ask questions. It may strike you as sort of being, okay, I've made it through the difficult part. This is the home stretch where I can kind of stride into the finish line, and that's not the case. This is it's a very important part of the interview. It tells the interviewer about what kind of due diligence you've done, how thoughtful you may have been in that, and echoing Kabir just now, if there is information that is, for example, already sort of readily accessible on the website, and you're asking effectively a question that could have been gleaned from a few moments of due diligence, that's not going to start you off on the best possible footing. Whereas if it appears that you've done some due diligence and you have thoughtful questions either about sort of what the firm is doing in a particular space based on recent activity that may be available at Global Arbitration Review or elsewhere, you're inquiring about, for example, the types of mentorship, training opportunities, expanding upon what information may be available on the website. That's the type of thing I think that will not only be very useful to you in considering different firms, and that you really should weigh quite carefully, but it will also not unhelpfully signal to your interviewer that you've put the time in, and that you're taking the interview seriously, that you've invested time beforehand. And these are all, in my view, positive signals that you would wish to send as a candidate. And you might be surprised at sort of how infrequently it is that we'll have interviews in which candidates appear to have done that additional legwork and have prepared thoughtful questions for it.
So how to prepare for an interview? I think we have touched on a lot already. You do need to prepare, read up on the person you're interviewing with and on the firm you're interviewing with. You should prepare for technical questions in advance. The same always come up, right? What's an interesting legal issue you've dealt with in a class? What are the trends? Or what particular case did you find interesting? These questions come back time and again, so they really should not be a surprise for you. And your answers should be practiced and prepared. And so I guess that's my main contribution to this question. Prepare by speaking the answers to the questions in advance. Oral advocacy is a big part of what we do. I rarely go in and say something out loud for the first time when I actually say it before my audience. I've usually said it before, and I have never said something before to myself and not improved upon it the second time. It's always better the second time that you do it, always. And so it's the same with an interview. The first time you're going to explain what you think is an interesting legal issue, you're going to have waiting periods, you're going to have you're going to want to redo it, and you're going to not be very happy with the delivery. So you should have done it. I mean, that's my advice. Do it yourself, either by yourself or with a friend if you're comfortable doing that. And you can give each other tips on what works. If you do it with a friend, that person can actually tell you what they thought came across well and where you were maybe a little long-winded or had trouble giving a clear and concise explanation of the point that you were trying to convey. So with all these recurring questions, I do think you should absolutely be prepped with an answer. Of course, you don't want to sound like you learned something by heart and now you're reciting it. And every single time you actually give the answer, it should sound a little differently, but it should be prepared. That's my main tip for this.
Ank stole my thunder because I was literally going to say that. Practice in front of a mirror, practice with your friend. The muscle memory of talking persuasively. You need to get familiar with that. So do it. A lot of your questions is talking about yourself. And that is something which for most cultures, I would say probably this is uniquely American. So in pretty much every other country, that's uncomfortable. Practice that. Eye contact, important. Eye contact also important on Zoom. It's sometimes harder on Zoom, so just practice that. Another just related point, if you were asked a technical question and you don't know the answer, don't make up stuff. People will appreciate you are not humans. You may not know everything. Try to pivot in an intelligent manner to something that you can talk about, but don't lying, giving non-credible answers as though you know it, overselling. Those are very apparent to your interviewer, and those never come across well. So I'd just say, trust yourself. You are already going in with the good background, with a good preparation. You are all from good schools. Trust yourself. Be positive. These are just some finer points to help you.
Thanks very much all for this very thoughtful answer. Switching now to maybe the last section, a bit more general and beyond the interview. Do you have any advice on how best to build a profile for a career in international arbitration? Today, there are a lot of opportunities between mentorships, writing competitions, various other projects. What in your opinion are good ways or good projects to engage in to distinguish from other candidates or to build a profile? And maybe Ank, you can go first if that's fine.
Sure, I'm happy to. Do excellent work every time. Everything you do the best you can. You make an impression with every single thing that you do. Never underestimate something. Just because building a career, you build it block by block, step by step. It's a long-term process. It's a process that lasts your entire career, actually. And so showing that you are a serious, thoughtful professional in everything that you do, I think is very important. Find a mentor, find a sponsor. I think that depends a lot on which type of organization you join. When you join a law firm like mine, There are many opportunities to find a mentor or sponsor within the firm, and that's very important to do when you're at maybe a smaller organization. And it's more difficult to find somebody in-house. There's plenty of opportunities to get outside sponsors and mentors. And even if you are in a firm like mine, it's a good thing to do also. Young ICA has a sponsorship program, for instance, or a mentorship program that I know. I didn't participate in it myself yet, but I know several people who did, and I've heard very positive experiences from both sides of the relationship. I think it's a very valuable program, both for the mentees, but also for the mentors. We all need mentors and sponsors throughout our career again. And so I think that's really important, to find somebody that you can benefit from, but that you can give value to. And of course, that's the truth about all these relationships. They are really a two-way street. The sponsor or the mentor also gets things out of the relationship, and understanding that and creating value in a two-way street, I think, is important. Try to get active in an international arbitration organization. There's many, and there's many where there are opportunities. It's a crowded field, but you can make a difference. And so find the one where you see an opportunity, you can do something. In the beginning, say yes to a lot of things and try to take on things so that you can prove yourself. I think a lot of them provide opportunities for editing, for instance, those types of jobs, which actually are hard work. Take those jobs and do the hard work, and it'll pay benefits for the rest of your career. And then I would say be strategic. So, plan your career, try to identify what you think you need to do and go for it. On the other hand, also keep an eye out for opportunities and grasp those. A lot of the things that I've done over time were, I'll have a strategic goal that didn't quite work out, but something else came my way and I grabbed that, and it ends up giving me basically the same as what I was originally looking for. It just came to me in a different way. And if I was too unflexible and focused on what I had set out, I would not have taken that and missed out on a lot of opportunities, I think.
I genuinely have little to add to that very helpful advice. I suppose one small point for those of you who are quite junior, who will be pivoting into private practice, for example, for the first time next year, or at least are early in your careers. In my view, and others may take a different one, the most important part of building a profile will be internal. It'll be a function of the work that you're doing at your firm. And Ank touched earlier on writing ability, and I just can't emphasize this enough. Becoming a better writer and cultivating that, taking every available opportunity to improve upon it, and there will be many, that will be critical. And I've seen sometimes in juniors that they look around and they feel that they're getting lapped out there, that there are people of their seniority who are already speaking on panels, who are publishing articles, and it strikes them as signaling that they need to be doing much more in the community. And there will be a time for that. The most important thing early on, though, is for you to focus on building up a reputation with the colleagues at your firm, that you are reliable, that you work hard, are a good colleague, and do good work. And with time, as you cultivate that internal reputation, with a little bit of legwork, the external one will come.
Again, this is a very agreeable panel. I have little to add. Your first 2 years in your career, you probably want to invest in building skills. So, just really focus on becoming the expert in a case, somebody who knows the facts, somebody who knows everything about what you are doing. If somebody calls you at 2 in the morning and tells you, where is this? What is this? You have the answer, right? Hugh touched upon this. There's an internal profile and an external profile, and both are important. In your early stages, learn the skill, learn how we make the statue, build those. Third year, you're technically entering into a mid-level. Think about smaller pieces, Kluwer. Good starting place if you haven't done it, partner with somebody. Join one or two organizations strategically, but be active with them. Don't do what I did, join 7 and did nothing. You rather join 2 bodies, but do something. Try to take leadership positions, volunteer. So think of your career more as a marathon, right? So you have short-term goals, long-term goals. This is where I would like to be. But your first 2 years, just really learn, understand the firm structure, understand the case, understand how to write, understand how the firm likes you to write. That's often even more challenging because different people have different preferences. So learn that. Once you have mastered that, then think about incrementally building your profile. So that's what I would suggest, echoing what the 2 prior awesome speakers said.
Fantastic. I feel like I learn a lot more just hearing all your professional views on how young juniors can develop. And so, being conscious of time, we just want to wrap up with one final question, bringing it back to the student perspective. What are your opinions on what courses that students right now looking towards a career later on should consider taking in school? And more generally, do you have any more parting advice for LLM students in particular who are looking towards perhaps building a career in the US specifically? Perhaps Anki wants to start this off.
Sure, thanks, Andrea. On the classes, yes, I think this is a critical question. Students often think that they should fill if they want to have a career in arbitration, they should fill their list of classes with arbitration classes. That's not the case. That's the most important message that I want to convey on this board and probably on the panel in general. Of course, you need to take an arbitration class because this is the field you want to practice in. So you need to learn it and you need to show that you have an interest in it. But this field requires a lot more than knowledge of arbitration law. And so you should not just have arbitration classes. When you are an LLM, take a contracts class. It is so important. A lot of the arbitration work that we do comes our way in New York because New York law governs, and it's really a New York law question. And so contracts is, and it's typically a contract question. So contracts law is an absolutely basic fundamental class. I would be very hesitant to take on an LLM who has not taken contracts because I would feel they're missing a basic class. That's the key class, I think. Other than that, again, as I've said before, it's ultimately about economic recovery. So any kind of economics class is of interest. Anything that will help you with understanding damages, accounting, some type of economics class, I think is very helpful. And then there are still several firms in the city. We're not one of them, but there's still several firms where people do arbitration, but they also do litigation. And of course, by the way, you can do that at our firm too, but we do have associates who do mainly of only arbitration, but there are several firms where you're expected to do both. And so you must then take a civil procedure class and evidence. Those 2 classes are very, very important. And even at a firm like myself, I took those 2 classes, and I think they've always been extremely helpful for me in my career to understand the US legal framework from a procedural angle. Of course, even if you do arbitration work, very often there's enforcement actions or collateral action in the US courts. And maybe your litigation colleague might do the actual oral argument before the judge, you will be involved in the brief, and you need to understand the US concepts. So I think a contracts class, an economics class, and Civ Pro and evidence for me are key classes.
Kabir, I keep going ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Ank.
Sorry, just parting wisdom, 2 words. Good luck. It takes grit to also find a job in this field, but you need it for the job too. So if this is what you want, be smart about it, persist. You'll probably get some rejection along the way. I got more rejection letters than I sent letters in the beginning. And I ended up where I am. So, persist, don't take it personally. This is all about the right person at the right time. And it's not about any lack of skills or qualities if things are a little tough, and be flexible and creative. And thank you again.
I see that we're already north of the hour, so I'll simply echo Ank, tacking on, should time permit. And I know that many LLMs are sort of limited by New York bar requirements as to how many non-US courses they may take, but legal writing, should the opportunity present itself, further to what we were talking about before. And I think that public speaking is something that can be very useful to careers over time. And if you don't have experience in that, law school can be a great opportunity to secure that. But more than anything, as Ank said, good luck.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat anything, just wishing you all very good luck. This is a stressful time. Take care of your mental health, do some deep breathing, go for walks when it's not -10 outside. Do things to, you want to be fresh and prepared, but you don't want to get so anxious or apprehensive that you are negative and feel dejected when it is a stressful time. Just acknowledge that. So try to find ways to relax and take good care. Be awesome. You will all do great. So never lose perspective of that.
Thank you, all 3 of you, for the really good final parting words that I hope everyone really takes to heart. Indeed, this is not an easy field to succeed in, and it really takes, grit, perseverance, and just a lot of research and perfect timing. With that, we want to thank everyone who has tuned in today, and thank anyone who watches this recording in the future who wasn't able to join us live today. And we also want to extend our thanks to our 3 speakers, and Simon, my co-panelist, for all the amazing questions that you've managed to field today as well. Thank you once again. And we also trust that these 3 speakers remain open to any more cold emails or questions that we didn't manage to ask on behalf of anyone watching this today. So thank you once again for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.